The night before, I looked at the 3 membership cards on my desk. Heavy cardstock, understated logos, the kind of design that doesn't need to scream because it knows its value. I made myself a promise. Tomorrow, I wouldn't yell or curse. I would simply let the environment, the staff, and one carefully chosen sentence do all the work. Saturday morning arrived with perfect weather. I drove to pick up my in-laws in my usual sedan, noting my sister-in-law's barely concealed smirk. She had dressed for what she assumed would be a teaching moment. Designer outfit, branded handbag, ready to maintain her position in the social hierarchy. During the 20-minute drive, she held court about proper country club etiquette, giving advice about tipping staff and behaving in upscale environments. I drove in silence, a small smile on my face that probably looked like gratitude but was actually anticipation. At the security gate, the uniformed guard glanced at my license plate and a screen, then his expression changed from professional neutrality to warm recognition. "Good morning, Miss Rivera. Welcome back. Your guests are all cleared. Will you be using the main clubhouse today or the golf facilities?" I kept my voice casual. "Main clubhouse, I think." He handed me a parking pass with "member" printed across it. In my rearview mirror, I saw my sister-in-law's face register confusion before smoothing back into pleasantness. The Pinnacle Club's entrance was designed to take your breath away quietly. Perfect proportions, impeccable maintenance, attention to detail that costs a fortune but never announces itself. As we walked through the doors, a staff member I recognized approached immediately. "Miss Rivera, wonderful to see you again. Your usual table is available if you'd like, or we can arrange something larger for your party." My sister-in-law's eyes widened slightly. Throughout the morning, the reveals came in carefully spaced increments. Staff greeted me by name at every stop. The golf pro mentioned my last visit and asked about practicing the swing adjustment we'd discussed. The spa manager asked if I wanted to schedule my regular monthly massage. The restaurant host mentioned my favorite wine was back in stock. Every interaction was natural because it was genuine. This was actually my club. These people actually knew me. My sister-in-law tried to maintain composure, but I could see the pieces slowly coming together in a picture she didn't like. When we settled at a table overlooking the championship golf course, one of her friends couldn't contain her curiosity anymore. She pulled out her phone and started Googling, her eyes getting wider as she read. The Pinnacle Club's initiation fee was around $250,000. Annual dues exceeded 6 figures. Membership was capped at under 500 people with a years-long waitlist. Celebrities and business leaders competed for spots. My sister-in-law tried one last time to maintain control. "This is certainly a nice place. Must be wonderful to get invited somewhere like this. I'm sure your work connections are very grateful to bring you as their guest." She emphasized guest, still clinging to the assumption that I couldn't possibly be a member on my own merit. I let the moment breathe, taking a sip of water and looking out at the golf course. Then I set my glass down and pulled out my phone, opening the Pinnacle Club app. My membership ID was right at the top. Actually, I'm not a guest here. I'm a full member. I've been a member for about 2 years now, here and at 2 other clubs with similar initiation fees and vetting processes. The silence was profound. My sister-in-law's face went through rapid transformations: shock, disbelief, embarrassment, anger. I held my phone steady, then leaned back and delivered the line I had been saving. "I know you're really concerned about standards and quality. You've made that very clear over the years. So I thought I'd show you what my standards actually look like when I'm not performing them for an audience." The rest of the afternoon passed in a strange, tense politeness, but the power dynamic had shifted fundamentally and irreversibly. I wasn't the lucky girl who married up. I wasn't the simple one who needed guidance. I was someone who had built wealth quietly and spent it strategically, someone who had earned her place in rooms most people could only dream of accessing. My sister-in-law called within 2 hours, wanting to meet. At the coffee shop, she spoke first, her voice sharp with accusation. "That was humiliating. You made me look stupid in front of my friends." I kept my voice calm. "I didn't make you look stupid. You made assumptions based on my car and clothes, and today those assumptions bumped up against reality. That's not humiliation. That's correction." "Why didn't you tell us?" she demanded. I cut her off gently but firmly. I didn't want to be treated differently because of my bank account. I wanted basic respect as a human being, as family, regardless of what I could afford. But instead, for 5 years, you've commented on my standards, always implying I didn't measure up. My silence just gave you permission to keep making false assumptions. The conversation circled for 30 minutes until I decided to end it with clarity. Here's what's going to happen from now on. You don't get to comment on my standards, lifestyle, taste, or financial decisions. You don't get to make jokes at my expense. You don't get to position me as someone who needs your guidance. Because the truth is, I know exactly how to navigate these spaces. I've been navigating them successfully while you were busy performing your knowledge for an audience. If you want a real relationship based on mutual respect, I'm open to that. But if you can't let go of your need to rank people based on visible wealth signals, then we can keep our interactions to holidays and be polite strangers. Your choice. Later that evening, my husband and I had our own overdue conversation. He admitted he should have defended me more. I made something very clear. I would not attend family events where I was treated as a prop or punching bag. If he wanted me present, he needed to ensure I was treated with basic respect, not because of my money or memberships, but because I was his wife and deserved basic consideration. This story isn't really about country clubs or membership fees. Those details are just the vehicle for a lesson about class, respect, and the performance of superiority that happens in families every day. My sister-in-law used wealth as a weapon because she had confused having nice things with being a valuable person. The problem wasn't that she valued nice things. I do too. The problem was that she thought nice things made her better than other people, specifically better than me. The real revenge wasn't revealing my wealth or memberships. It was refusing to continue accepting her narrative about who I was and what I was worth. For years, I let her write the story. I was the simple one with low standards who needed guidance. I stayed quiet because I thought that was mature, because I didn't want to seem like I was bragging. But I learned something important. There's a difference between not performing wealth and allowing yourself to be diminished. Not correcting someone's false assumptions isn't humility. It's just permission for them to keep being wrong at your expense. If someone calls your standards low, check whether their soul is actually high enough to matter. Check whether they've earned the right to evaluate you. Check whether their opinion is based on knowledge or assumption. And if it's the latter, give yourself permission to simply not care. My sister-in-law's judgment of me wasn't about me at all. It was about her own insecurity, her own need to maintain a hierarchy where she was always on top, her own fear that if people like me were also successful, maybe her success wasn't as special as she needed it to be. The final truth is this. She still has one country club membership and a fragile sense of superiority built on visible wealth markers. I have 3 club memberships that I earned independently, a portfolio that generates income while I sleep, and peace of mind from knowing my worth isn't dependent on anyone else's validation. You tell me whose standards are really low. You tell me who won. The afternoon sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Riverside Country Club, casting elegant shadows across the marble floors and Persian rugs. This was my sister-in-law's domain, the place where she held court every Sunday, performing her carefully curated version of sophistication. Today, I had made the mistake of accepting her invitation to join the family for their weekly brunch. I arrived in my usual understated style, clean jeans, a simple cashmere sweater, minimal jewelry. I drove my reliable sedan, not because I couldn't afford better, but because I had never seen the point of using a car as a personality trait. As I walked through the entrance, my sister-in-law's eyes tracked me, taking in every detail with the kind of scrutiny usually reserved for health inspections. She was surrounded by her usual group of friends, women who measured their worth in handbag logos and vacation destinations. The conversation flowed around topics I had heard dozens of times before: trips to the Maldives, kitchen renovations, impossible spa waitlists. Then came the moment that would change everything. I had suggested something innocuous, probably a menu item, when my sister-in-law's voice cut through the ambient noise with surgical precision. "Oh, honey," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "Such low standards. But I guess when you don't really belong in these places, you don't know any better." She delivered the line with a laugh, looking around for validation, and her friends provided it with those awful half-laugh, half-pity sounds. My chest tightened. My face stayed neutral, a skill perfected over years of these gatherings, but inside, something shifted. None of them knew I was a full member at 3 of the most exclusive private clubs in the region, each with initiation fees hovering around $250,000. None of them knew the club we were sitting in wouldn't even make my top 5. None of them knew that while they were busy performing wealth, I was quietly living it. That day, my sister-in-law didn't just insult my taste. She accidentally bought herself front row tickets to the most expensive lesson of her life. I married into this family 5 years ago, and from the beginning, it was clear I would need to prove myself worthy. My husband came from established generational wealth, with expectations and unspoken rules about who belongs where. His sister had positioned herself as the family's arbiter of taste, deciding what was acceptable and what wasn't. She had married even more money and wielded her husband's bank account like a scepter, using country club memberships and designer labels as evidence of her superior judgment. My background was different. I grew up solidly middle class, put myself through college, and landed a job at a tech startup in its early days. When the company went public, my equity package transformed overnight into life-changing money. I invested carefully. Real estate when the market dipped, index funds, stakes in other promising startups. By the time I met my husband, I was already wealthy. But I didn't dress like it, didn't talk about it, didn't make it my entire personality. My sister-in-law interpreted this restraint as proof that I didn't have anything worth talking about. She assumed I was lucky to have married her brother, that I came from a simple background and needed her guidance. The micro-humiliations started immediately after the wedding. She criticized my car at Thanksgiving, calling it practical in a tone that made practical sound like a disease. She described my apartment as cozy, with air quotes. When I mentioned a vacation to a national park, she laughed about authentic experiences being great for people who couldn't afford the Amalfi Coast. The worst part wasn't the comments themselves. It was the delivery, always with a smile, always framed as helpful advice. She would say, "You really should let us guide you on these things. You just don't understand how high-end stuff works." And I let it slide, telling myself it wasn't worth the conflict. But the truth was darker. Every time I stayed silent, I gave her permission to believe she was right about me. The trigger moment came when someone mentioned planning a simple dinner party and asked for recommendations. I suggested a well-regarded local catering company with reasonable prices and excellent food. My sister-in-law seized on it like she had been waiting all morning for an opportunity. Her laugh cut through the conversation, loud and sharp. "Oh, sweetheart, only someone with such low standards would think that's special. But I guess when you're not used to real quality, you don't know the difference." She didn't say it quietly. She announced it to the entire table, to nearby tables, to the servers who paused to watch the minor drama unfold. Her friends reacted with awkward giggles and uncomfortable murmurs. My husband looked uncomfortable but said nothing. He never did, and his silence felt like agreement. I took a sip of water, set the glass down carefully, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. This wasn't just another microaggression I could swallow. This was my sister-in-law openly enjoying the power of making me feel small in her domain. She thought she was untouchable here, protected by the country club membership and wealthy friends. What she didn't know was that I had been building something too, just more quietly. The decision crystallized with perfect clarity. I would never argue with her verbally about standards again. Instead, I would show her what real high standards looked like, in a language she claimed to speak fluently, membership tiers, initiation fees, and the kind of exclusive access that money can buy, but class consciousness never could. What my in-laws never bothered to learn was that I was extraordinarily wealthy, the kind of wealthy where you stop checking price tags entirely, where financial decisions become about strategy rather than budget. Part of that wealth strategy involved joining private clubs for the actual value they provided, excellent facilities, serious networking opportunities, and environments where business relationships could develop naturally. Over the past 3 years, I had become quietly a full member at 3 of the most exclusive private clubs in the region. The first was a golf and business club with a $250,000 initiation fee and annual dues exceeding most people's salaries. The second was a city club focused on professional networking and art collections, with similar costs and a wait list typically running 3 to 5 years. The third was an international club requiring not just money, but professional recommendations and a vetting process that rejected more applicants than it accepted. I had joined all 3 using my own money, not a cent from my husband's family. The applications required extensive financial disclosures, professional references, and in one case, an in-person interview with the membership committee. I loved these clubs for what they offered: the golf courses, the libraries, the quiet spaces to work. I didn't love them as status symbols, which is why I never mentioned them to my in-laws. But sitting in that country club, absorbing my sister-in-law's public judgment, I realized something uncomfortable. Staying silent had started to look like agreeing. By never correcting their assumptions, I had allowed them to build an entirely false narrative about me. The irony was beautiful. She had spent years positioning herself as the family's expert on luxury, and all this time I had been operating at a level she couldn't even access. Not because she lacked money, but because she lacked the professional credentials and personal references that truly exclusive clubs actually care about. A few days after the low standards incident, I sent a carefully worded text to the family group chat, playing directly into their assumptions. I've been thinking about what you all said about standards and quality. I'd love to experience more of what you appreciate about these exclusive spaces. A client mentioned a place recently that sounded interesting. Would anyone be free next Saturday for an outing? My treat. My sister-in-law's enthusiastic agreement came immediately. She probably saw this as final proof that her guidance was working. I called the Pinnacle Club, the most expensive and exclusive of my 3 memberships, and arranged full-day guest passes. I specifically requested that staff treat me as they normally would, as a regular member, by name, with casual familiarity. I didn't ask them to make a big deal about my membership status. I just asked them to be natural and let my guests draw their own conclusions. The most delicate part was managing my own emotional preparation. I needed to be ready for any response without getting defensive or angry. I practiced keeping my tone neutral and factual, resisting the temptation to gloat or justify. The most powerful position was simply calm, the energy of someone merely correcting a misunderstanding rather than seeking validation.